Hi YouTube, this is Nolan. I built a custom sub box for my 2003 Mini Cooper. I wanted to narrate what I did during my build. I used 1/2 inch MDF for the whole box, 2 Kicker CVR 8-inch subwoofers, and it came out really nice. I did not build this box for sound quality, however. I did build it for usefulness. It sits flush, so it's mostly hidden, and it sounds pretty good. Here's just an above view from that template we were talking about previously. Again, you could build your box this way if you're looking for maximum volume. I didn't really feel it was necessary to complicate things, so I abandoned this piece. Later on, you'll see me use it to build the upper template. This is the trunk liner removed. This is how I built the original base plate that I was going to use. I traced it onto the wood, and then I lopped off the corners and made adjustments as necessary. This is the point at which I simplified things for the install. I decided to build a standard square box with just a top facial to it. Make sure to build your box about 1/2 inch shorter than you want, that way to incorporate for the additional wood that the top will provide. Here is that base plate I mentioned earlier. I placed it on top to use as a reference. It almost fit the shape, so it worked out really well. This next picture you'll see here is added cardboard to that to kind of fill in some of those gaps. Once you're all done with that, you can take that cardboard off, flip that plate upside down, draw it onto a piece of wood, and cut it out. Some people also like to use playing cards taped to the top of the wood since they are readily available and pretty cheap. Here's the top board of the sub box after I traced my template onto the MDF. It fit pretty well, actually. I don't think I made too many adjustments. I used a router to clean the edges up, but it's not terribly necessary. The carpeting will smooth out most of those imperfections. This section is where the sub box really started to come together for me, because it was flush where I wanted it, and it still met the dimensions of the subwoofers I was planning on using. These are just some generic cup terminals I bought on eBay. You can tell I went a little overboard with the measurements to get those perfectly squared up. I guess I was being a little too particular. Sorry to skip ahead. I guess I didn't take enough pictures during this project build, but I mounted the top plate. I kind of test fit the whole box together, and I started mounting where the subs were going to be. The upper holes in the very top plate, those you just have to kind of eyeball and hope you get it directly in the center of the area where you want the sub. Once you have those all built, or all cut I should say, then you could start building like countersinking rings. I believe I used two rings per subwoofer to get the depth that I wanted, and again that's 1/2 inch MDF. Having a good working router and a router with a jig for that matter is super important. To cut holes like these, you can use jigsaws and stuff, but you'll never get results like these. More importantly, when you do go to cut these holes, you do want to make sure to test your hole first on a piece of blank wood. That way you don't ruin your project, because once that hole is cut, it's a real nightmare to try and fix it. Here's an above view with one of the subs placed in there. I wanted there to be enough countersink to ensure that sub could move freely up and down without hitting anything, and it fit in there very well with almost an inch of clearance. Again, sorry for jumping ahead, but here's a good shot of those countersinks from the back side. The grills are already kind of mounted in place in this picture, but we'll get to that in a minute as to what I used for the grills and why I chose it. The idea again was just to countersink the sub, so you want to make a lot of good measurements. One's the actual size of the mounting hole for the sub, and the other one's slightly bigger to incorporate the full 8 inches of the face of the sub. If I could have done anything better at this stage, I think I would have made the uppermost hole in the top plate much larger so these subs could breathe a little better. I think they're struggling a little bit because they don't breathe as well as I'd hoped through the mesh and carpet. This is a little tricky, but I love this part of my design. I took 16 gauge perforated steel from McMaster. I don't recall what size the holes are in this, but I went down to Home Depot. I felt how sturdy 16 gauge sheet metal was. I was pretty happy with it. One of the things I was worried about is, I'm going to throw stuff on top of this thing. Is it ever going to dent? Can it still breathe well? And not be too thick. And I didn't want to feel it through the carpeting either. So this material overall worked out very good. Cutting it is a nightmare. It's steel, so take your time with it. What I did after this was I measured the thickness of that steel and I set my router to that depth. And if you're careful, you can countersink these metal plates directly into the wood. So when you run your hand across it, it's practically flush. And again, I put some, I guess some chamfers on the screw holes that hold those plates in place, so it would countersink the heads of the screws a little bit. So again, you couldn't feel them when you ran your hand across the carpet. Here's again, same shot, different angle of those plates mounted, kind of countersunk into the wood. Expect to have round corners obviously whenever you're using a router, but it didn't seem to affect it at all. Here's a good shot from down low where you could see I just barely had to countersink these to compensate for the thickness of the steel. I got some generic carpet, some subwoofer carpet off eBay, and tacked it down with some 3M spray adhesive. Came out really nice. I didn't use too much spray adhesive on top of the subwoofers. I was concerned it might spray through the perforated steel and get all over the subs. Not that it's a big deal, but something I looked out for, and it's held up for 6 or 8 months now and hasn't pulled up at all. Here you're gonna get to see the final product in the trunk. Like I said, it sits really flush. You can get it in and out easily. My dimensions panned out perfectly somehow to the point where the sub box can come in and out freely and stay under those hips that the Mini Coopers have on either one of the side panels there above the storage bins. I just want to finish this up real quick with a couple notes. Some challenges I ran into were depth. Between, I guess, the subwoofer and the bottom of the box, I think I had about 1/2 inch in the end, which is still plenty of room to play with, but it's a little closer to the bottom of the box than you normally want to be. Air volume obviously is too small for these subs, but again, I was going more for form than function. One piece of MDF did do it, 1/2 inch. Go down to Home Depot, it's about $22, and it fits in the back of a Mini Cooper if you cut it in half. So I don't have a roof rack, it worked out. I did make a jig for my router out of a piece of an old clipboard actually. It's a hard pressed ground up wood, so it's strong enough and sturdy enough not to bend or flex, and it was thin enough to the point where I could bolt it to the bottom of my router and make my own jig out of it to cut like 10-inch holes. I think I was cutting some like 7-inch holes with it, so it worked out really well. My whole concern throughout this entire build was about like the feel when you ran your hand over the carpet. Could you even tell if the subs were there? And then more importantly, like denting. If you threw something on top of this sub box, was it going to dent that metal plate? and I think that affected the sub box build a little bit, but overall it did complete both of those objectives. Some things I might do differently in the future, maybe do a larger upper plate holes, just so that subs could breathe a little better. Maybe a port, or maybe just one sub. This is my second sub box build, my first narration for YouTube, so disregard all the ums and whatnot. I've never seen a sub box built this way before, with the metal guards over it underneath carpet and hidden like that. So just get out there and try some new things and see what happens. The subs have lasted for I think like 6 or 8 months easy. I don't remember exactly when I built this. I used Windows Movie Maker 6 from Vista. The new one's terrible, and that kind of is why some of these pictures are really grainy. And I had a lot of fun building it, so feel free to leave any comments. I'll try my best to answer them. I don't really have any dimensions if that's what you're looking for. You just got to go out there and just test fit it. I think it took me with a full-time job like 2 to 3 months to build this. Thanks, guys.